Hello everyone. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the concept of shadow and try to apply that to the INFJ personality. I'm somewhat misunderstood by people. At least some people think that I reject the notion of shadow, and that's not true. I actually espouse the notion of shadow, and I think that what Jung articulated in terms of shadow is a very useful descriptive tool to explore our unconscious. And insofar as we are interested primarily in NI dominance in the INFJ, although we are also interested in other types, but the INFJ is my focus. Because of NI dominance, the influence of the unconscious on our lives is even more important. So it would be kind of a shame, if not kind of mad, to not use those conceptual resources that Jung offered in terms of the shadow to make more sense of our lives and our relationship to the unconscious. What I do reject is the idea that the shadow is organized like a personality, that it has cognitive functions. Because from the moment that you talk about shadow functions, you're talking about the shadow being able to access and use certain functions. So you're giving the shadow an I, in a sense. You're giving it like a situation and a point of view. And from that moment on, you're really talking about a personality, which is why you hear people sometimes talk about the ENFP shadow of an INFJ, right? So I don't think that makes a lot of sense. I would not really talk about the shadow having, a structure like a personality. I don't think that INFJs, there's not the slightest evidence, in my view, of INFJs having ENFP shadows. I don't think that makes any sense. And note that Jung has certainly never said anything like this. So it's not a view that Jung would have espoused either. So I hope you can appreciate the difference. Now, one of the reasons is that the unconscious is not organized like conscious experiences. It's much more blurry and vague, and boundaries melting, and like one particular area of content, sort of like dripping into another, or like bleeding into another. Thought contents or unconscious contents being associated through resemblance, through similarity, through metonymy, through synecdoche, through analogy. It's condensation. Basically, all the phenomena that we find in dreams are unconscious phenomena. And I think you will agree with me that when we experience dreams, we don't really experience a full-blown, articulate, structured personality speaking to us, but rather like this conglomeration of different messages that are often highly metonymic, highly condensed, highly analogical. And the very task of deciphering a dream is really complex. So it's not transparent. It has extremely significant content, but it is not transparent. So there's no point really talking about the shadow functions. It's a different thing to argue that INFJs use all 8 functions, right? As long as you're saying that the bottom 4 functions are not shadow functions as such. They're not functions of the shadow. They're just functions we use, and they're classified by their level of consciousness or unconsciousness or integration or unintegration, okay? So the shadow is more like this constellation of what Jung calls shadow complexes, unconscious complexes that have effective charge. Sometimes he calls it a feeling tone. So they're like themes. They're organized by thematic area in a way. Again, like the contents that are sort of gravitating around the themes in the unconscious are associated by metonymy, by resemblance, by analogy, and by condensation. So you might have a lot of contents that at face value might not seem to have a lot of, in common with each other, and interpretation is required to understand that there is a link, okay? And so you can eventually find a theme. And Jung was very good. He used the word association test, other techniques. Other psychoanalysts also use their own techniques. There are schools to identify what are the main shadow themes, and they differ from person to person. You'll have shadow complexes in common, like usually there is a mother complex, usually there is something to do with love, often there is a father complex, but there can be a lot of other complexes as well with their particular themes, and they will have effective charge and a feeling tone, which means that if you encounter something in your conscious life that will remind you of the theme or will evoke the theme in you, you might not realize what it's evoking because the content is unconscious, but you will feel like suddenly you'll feel like a high level of emotional intensity, sometimes agitation, sometimes stress, sometimes anxiety. You'll feel like an emotional burst of some kind, and you usually won't understand where it's coming from. That's usually due to a subliminal image in the external world activating one of those unconscious complexes that have a strong feeling tone to them. Now, those complexes are literally the same thing as shadow complexes, okay? So you can understand hopefully why we don't have to ascribe particular cognitive functions to those complexes, and why, in fact, it might obfuscate and obscure more than it can help and clarify. Now, I just want to finish this video by just mentioning that, again, we can't just speak of an INFJ shadow. We have to, first of all, every individual has a particular kind of shadow. And every individual's shadow is unique, just in the same way that every individual's personality is unique. However, to the extent that we can say this individual falls well under an INFJ description, and that individual falls well under more like an ISTP description and so forth, we can probably also talk about how falling under that description in your conscious life and in terms of your makeup says something about the contours, the perimeter that your shadow will have in terms of its contents and its structure. And in fact, I will go further and say that when we drill down and look specifically at the INFJ shadow, we'll have to distinguish between 4 types of shadows, 4 shadow structures and general contents. Again, there'll be a lot of variety within each, but the 4 different ones echo the 4 different subtypes of INFJ. So a secure shadow, a compliant shadow, a withdrawn shadow, there's the solipsistic shadow, and a spiritualized shadow. And in the next video, we'll look more into that. Okay, guys, so stay tuned. And again, don't forget that I have written 2 books on the INFJ personality. If you want to know more about all these topics in great depth, The Infinite Soul is my latest book, came out not long ago. Check the reviews. The link is right below. INFJ Life in Modern World, which looks at how INFJs can attain purposefulness, meaningfulness, a rich life, value, and flourishing in the world, even though this external world is often perceived to be hostile. The key is to remain authentically INFJ, and this book explains you how to do that. Okay, so check the link below. And don't forget that there's also a prequel to it, which is The Ecstatic Soul, a new look at INFJ personality, which is all about the INFJ mind, what INFJs are like inside their minds, what's it like to think like an INFJ, what's it like to be an INFJ, what's it like to feel like an INFJ. This is the most in-depth investigation of this topic, so the link is below if you want to explore. Check the reviews, there's lots of them, and they're very good. Finally, guys, don't forget that the life source and lifeblood of my channel is my Patreon page. Kind donations help me keep going with this channel. I very much depend on your generous support. And don't forget, in return, you get access to a special Discord server where I can even provide some advice as to what your type might be, either a subtype of INFJ or some different type. We have people, it's starting to get quite active there. It's been beautifully made. So you get exclusive access to our Discord server, exclusive access to bonus videos every 2 weeks where I go really in depth about particular topics. The latest one was the FETI of the INFJ and other things besides. So check the link below to Patreon. You'd help me massively. And I thank you very much. Bye-bye.